Hello and welcome to another episode of Unlock the CPA Exam Show. In this show, you will get the tips, tricks, and advice to help you pass the CPA exam on your first try and become the most trusted professionals in the world, CPAs. This is your host, Ala'a Abu Dayyeh, and today we have with us Darius Clark. Darius is a CPA exam tutor and accountant and the founder of I-75 CPA Review Course. Well, thank you, Darius, for being with us today, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ala'a, and thank you and congratulations on your success with my CPA excellence and with this Unlock the CPA Exam series. It's a fabulous opportunity for candidates to learn more about their exam and about preparation.
Thank you, thank you. So why did you choose to get into the CPA review industry?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I knew there was a need for CPA exam tutoring because my own CPA exam experience was misery. I had heard all the horror stories about the CPA exam while I was in college, but I probably didn't believe it because I had heard the same warnings about college when I was in high school and the same warnings about high school when I was in middle school. What's the real story? Well, in school, we quickly learn all the tricks, what teachers to avoid, how to get on the professor's good side, go up to the teacher on the day of the test with your paper, look in their eyes and say, is this what you want for question number 4? Do I have the right idea here for this test question? But the CPA exam requires a whole different bag of tricks, right? So when I became a CPA candidate, I relied on these old school techniques. Problem was, on exam day, I looked around, but none of my teachers were there. I couldn't ask them any questions. So how do you think I did, Ala'a? How do you think I, the kingmaker, Darius Clark, how do you think I did the first time I took the exam? You think I passed? No.
No.
No, I didn't pass. I didn't pass. In fact, I didn't pass a second time either. In fact, if I did pass, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. I probably wouldn't be doing CPA exam tutoring. I wouldn't be the host of the I-75 CPA Review Course because I wouldn't even think that there was a need for it. If anybody could just show up to the exam and pass, who would need something like this, right? So I failed twice. And then you know what I did? I took a year off. I took a year off from studying. And it was then that I realized that the AICPA was not going to take the CPA exam and bring it down to my level just so I could pass. They weren't going to dumb it down for me. I had to commit to the training because this CPA exam is a marathon to train for. And this is the kind of thing I had to determine for myself. Am I ready for that marathon? I tried it twice and I failed. Was I ready to commit to the marathon of training? Bottom line, when I did finally pass the CPA exam, I knew the material so well by then that I said, hey, I could teach CPA review. And back then, CPA review was taught live in hotel banquet rooms, places like universities on weekends. And I thought that would be good kind of work for me. Problem was, I wasn't from a prestigious accounting firm, nor was I a tenured faculty member at a 4-year college. So I wasn't what the CPA review courses were looking for. See, they're looking for, when they used to teach live, they only wanted somebody who had a big firm and somebody who was a tenured professor, because then the person could say, hi, I'm your professor for advanced accounting today, and next time you can have me because I also teach for Becker CPA. You see, that's what they're looking for when they hire CPA review providers. I didn't have any of that background. I was teaching at a 2-year college. So at first I volunteered to teach CPA review by being an administrator for the course. I would show up and take attendance. They asked me to hand out books, so I handed out books. I paid my dues for a few years before they would even let me lead the classroom. Then came the day I taught my first CPA review course, and I quickly became their #1 instructor. And I taught live in person for several years. The best part was that students would come up to me after class and say, hey, I really like the way you teach. Can you tutor me privately? So that's how this started. I began with 1 or 2 students per day. We would meet on Skype. Then I built it up to 3 or 4 students a day with referrals, eventually 7 to 8 students per day via Skype. And each session's an hour, Ala'a. So we're talking 7 hours, 8 hours of live one-on-one interaction, CPA review sessions. I started to have a long waiting list for tutoring. And that's when I made the inevitable decision to start a small CPA review course and have each recorded lecture seem like a one-on-one tutoring session, because the tutoring sessions were so popular and so effective.
Yeah. Great.
So that's how this started.
Yeah. Great. Your story is amazing and very inspirational, really. You are doing a great job.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to hear. Every time I get another LinkedIn recommendation, I remember how fortunate I am to be able to do this. Now up to like 92 LinkedIn recommendations for CPA exam tutoring and the I-75 course. And it's a thrill every time I get another one.
Yeah. So how does the I-75 CPA review course maintain such a high passing rate when the national average is below 50%?
Yeah, that's right. The national average is below 50%. It's a good question. How do I maintain such a high passing rate? Here's how I do it. It's easy, really, but don't tell my competitors. Here's how I do it. I only teach CPA review. It's that simple. I only teach CPA review. I only work with CPA candidates. I don't teach CPE, continuing professional education. I don't teach that. I don't teach college anymore either. I don't teach CFA or EA, the enrolled agent test. See, here's the deal. You didn't know as a candidate when you signed up for a course like Becker that they were going to wheel out a CPE course speaker, an industry expert, but there's a catch. That industry expert lectures like there's no test afterwards, because CPE lecturers, they don't work directly with CPA candidates. And that's a disconnect. And that disconnect puts the pressure on you. CPE speakers, they lecture to who? They lecture to professionals. They lecture to CPAs, people that have a license already. So because they don't work with CPA candidates, that puts the pressure on the candidate, pressure that you didn't expect. You might make it through the high-level lecture, but then when you go to the multiple choice questions, that's when you feel like bad student. And I can't emphasize this enough, Ala'a. When it comes to a CPA candidate, there's no such thing as bad student, but there is bad teacher. Bottom line, the secret to my high passing rate is that I only teach CPA review. I work with CPA candidates only. All of my students are either trying to pass FAR, Audit, BEC, or Reg. That's it. And because of that, I'm able to develop an instinct for what they should know to pass FAR, Audit, BEC, or Reg. Not CPE, not CFA. I'm not distracted by teaching outside material. I work only with CPA candidates. And that's why I have over 90 LinkedIn recommendations, and I get more every week.
Great, great, yeah. So that's really incredible, and your candidates are really lucky to have like a tutor like you who is really guiding them and helping them increase their scores and pass the exam. That's great.
It's true, Ala'a, because just 2 or 3 live tutoring sessions with me will add 7 to 10 points to your score. Because a lot of times I'll find a student who's just lost. They started out well, they had a lot of motivation when they started, but then they wound up in a test bank full of 10,000 questions when you really don't need even half that many to pass the exam. What's the problem with 10,000 questions? Half of them have no chance of being asked on the exam.
Oh, yeah.
They were asked maybe once before, so they got into the collection of maybe Glime's test bank. And now you're sitting there trying to remember all these 10,000 questions and make sense of them. And the problem is you bump into what's called outlier questions. And outlier questions will start to make you doubt your confidence and question what you know. And you never want to have that problem as a CPA candidate. You never want to be in a situation where you say, oh, I thought I knew that, and now I don't think that's right anymore. What do I do? Because you found one crazy outlier question, now you're ready to throw everything that you know and question it. And so I go under what's called the 90%, 10% rule. If I'm going to include a question in my video lecture or my I-75 test bank, it's got to have at least a 90% chance of being asked on the exam. If it has less than a 10% chance, I don't put it in the course. I take it out in the back of the barn and shoot it. I say, I don't want this anywhere near the course, because all it's going to do is get candidates nervous, frustrated, and upset. And it's not going to be on the exam anyway. It's got less than a 10% chance. But you know what? You need somebody who does this every day to know the difference between what questions are very likely to be on the exam and which ones may have appeared but are not likely to be on the exam again. You've got to have an instinct for this. And the only way to get that instinct is to work with CPA candidates only and teach CPA review only. And that's why I'm able to do that. And that's why I have that many recommendations.
Great, great. Really, you are like helping CPA candidates, saving their time, which is very important. The time factor, which
you
every
couldn't have
CPA
said it better.
candidate
Yep, the
suffers
time.
in.
Who has the time to study? Because most of my students work, right? So they got a few hours a day to figure out when to study. To have someone like me tell them, all you need to know is this much about this topic, but don't go anywhere past this part, because that's not going to be on the exam. And for example, let's say somebody's studying Reg and Reg corporate tax. Gosh, they could ask a whole exam on Reg corporate tax. It's such a big area, right?
Yeah.
So you do your Reg corporate tax and you bump into something like brother-sister controlled groups, right? Now, most candidates could not do a calculation about brother-sister controlled groups, because if they tried to follow it in Becker's video lecture, they'd probably be like, oh, this is killing my confidence. I don't want. But they don't realize that the exam is less than 10% chance to ask you to do a calculation on a brother-sister controlled group. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to know something about a brother-sister controlled group. You got to know something about it. What do you have to know? Well, you have to know that a brother-sister controlled group is not eligible to file a consolidated tax return. But that's about all that you're going to have to know about a brother-sister controlled group. If you didn't know what you didn't have to go out and learn, if you didn't know where the limits are, say, well, I don't have to know that much. Why? Because Darius told me it's got less than a 10% chance of being asked on the exam. If you didn't know that, think about the time that you would be out there orbiting and wondering, well, do I have to know this? But working with somebody who does this all day long is such an advantage to you, the candidate. Whereas most of the courses will just put the video out there and they'll be like, well, watch all this and do all the questions and here's all the lecture material. But they don't say, this has an 80%, 90% chance of being asked. This has a less than 10% chance, but it was once asked, so here it is. I'll do that. I'm the only one that does that. If it's got less than a 10% chance, it will not appear in my course. And that's why my candidates have such a high passing rate, but they all get between a 78 and an 82 because they didn't waste an extra whole bunch of months studying and wound up with a 90. We don't want that. We want everybody to pass, but we don't want you to have to do too many, like 10,000 questions, because then you're either going to get a 90 or you're going to fail. And you don't want that. All right,
great.
I'm going on too much with that, but that's really important, is to have somebody guide you as to what you need and what you don't need. And that's just not out there. There's nobody doing that except for me.
Yeah.
Because no one's really qualified. The CPE instructors certainly don't know how to do that, because what do? They teach CPE. They haven't taken the exam in many years, and they don't work with candidates anyway. They work with CPAs. They work with professionals, executives. So if you're taking your CPA review from a CPE course speaker, I feel for you. I really do, because you got a lot of pressure on you.
Yeah, really. So is the I-75 CPA review course a complete review course? Is it enough to pass, or other materials are needed?
You know what? I get that question every day. And I-75 is designed as a complete review course, So no other materials are needed, but here's the deal. Most of my students come to I-75, they come to me already having access to some other provider. So as long as you have other materials, I can help you and say, all right, here's how you get some value out of what you have. You don't have to completely throw it away. But the best part is you can stop watching their videos that weren't helping you. If you have these other materials, I'll show you when to pick them back up and start using them again, what they're good for, which is mock exams, once you understand the concepts. But not until then. And how you're going to get on the concepts, how you're going to get confidence, that's where I come in. That's the value that I provide. My candidates, my students walk into the exam on the day of the exam and they say, there's no way that you can get me because I know something about everything and I know what I'm supposed to know. I didn't spend hours out in the desert wandering around wondering if this is something I need to know or not, because I took care of all that for them. Yes, it's a complete course. And it's even better than that because it takes away a lot of the things you don't need.
Yeah, great, great. So why do you still offer like live one-to-one tutoring, even though you have such a successful CPA review course?
Yeah, that's a good question. Why do I still do live one-on-one tutoring? Well, that's where it all began. And some students like a combination of both. Once a student's an I-75 subscriber paying $99 a month for the subscription to the course, they get a nice discount on tutoring. It's just $99 a session once they're a subscriber. Each session is 1 hour. We meet on Skype. Students love it. Offering both live tutoring and I-75, it's better for the candidate to have a choice. And it's better for me because instead of doing 7 to 8 sessions per day like I was 2 years ago and having a long waiting list, now I only do about 2 to 3 live sessions a day because over 700 students are loving the I-75 course. You've seen my 90+ LinkedIn recommendations, so you know. But yes, some people still love the live one-on-one. And it's great to be able to offer it because out of all the CPA review courses, I'm the only one who teaches the live course and also does one-on-one. Whereas the other courses might offer tutoring, but not with the same person who teaches the material in the video. So again, there's a disconnect.
Yeah, great. That's amazing, really. So can you give us some FAR exam tips and tricks?
FAR, huh? Yeah, you started with the right one. Well, FAR will take the longest to prepare. So if it's your first time taking FAR, it's probably going to take you 3 to 4 months to prepare. Now that may shock some people because I know there's people on the internet saying you can pass a CPA exam in 3 weeks, but no, that's not reality. 3 weeks? Really? No. I'll tell you who could pass in 3 weeks. If you just took the exam and got a 74, okay, then you can come back and tell me that you're going to spend 3 weeks on FAR and then you're going to retake it. But if it's your first time taking FAR, it's probably going to take you 3 to 4 months to prepare. See, even if you just failed with a 70, the problem with that is that you probably got 2 or 3 points right for guessing well on multiple choice questions. So now instead of a 70, you failed with a 70, but you really failed with like a 68 or a 67 because you guessed and you got a couple of questions right that way. So 3 to 4 months the first time. The only time it would be less is if you just took the exam and got a 74. Now, as for content and where to focus, if I had to pick one topic in FAR, business combinations is definitely going to be on your FAR exam. Now, what within business combinations do I have to know? Well, you've got to be able to calculate implied fair value based on the purchase price. That's the #1 thing they're going to ask you in business combinations. Based on the purchase price, based on the percentage acquired, what's the implied fair value of the subsidiary? Why do you need that? Well, you got to be able to calculate goodwill, right? They love to ask about goodwill on a CPA exam in a business combination. So you got to be able to calculate that implied fair value to get the goodwill, to get the non-controlling interest. All that is going to be on your exam in FAR. Now, staying with business combinations, what else in business combinations is a must know? Intercompany inventory, a huge hit. Intercompany inventory. So you have a business combination and the parent sells inventory to the sub. and there's a profit and you have to eliminate it, right? And the journal entries involved. That's a must. Intercompany inventory. And then stay with business combinations for a minute. Expect a sim on consolidated financial statements where they give you a work paper, right? An electronic spreadsheet, and you got to make those adjustments, those eliminations. Well, the good news is that in the I-75 course, I teach business combinations very gently, and the multiple choice questions presented in the course, they have a 90% chance of being asked on your exam. I take the ones that I don't think are going to be on the exam, and I say, you don't need these. And that's important because you could spend hours on business combinations watching those high-level lectures from Becker and others and come out of there and say, I watched it, but then I went to the multiple choice questions and I feel like bad student. Well, you're not going to say that while watching the I-75. Other FAR topics include bonds. You got to know bonds. Things like leases, especially the new operating lease rules, right? When something's new on the exam, they love to ask about it. The CPA exam prides itself on being very relevant. They want to be a relevant exam, Ala'a. You know what that means to be relevant? If it's new, they're going to test it. Biggest fear that the CPA exam has is that you're studying for this hard exam, you pass it, and it really doesn't mean anything because all that information is outdated and nobody cares about it anymore. That's a nightmare for the AICPA. So they constantly update the material, and when they update it, what do? They test it, and they're going to make sure you know it. So the biggest change this year in FAR was the operating lease rules, and guaranteed it's going to be on the exam. So we spent time on that. You got to know that. That's a major hit in FAR this year more than any other because it's new. And then, of course, business combinations always, bonds always. Government and not-for-profit, two probably in my most popular video lectures. So that's FAR. FAR is going to take the longest. I always say start with FAR because you're not using any of your precious 18-month window while you study for FAR. The last thing you want to do is, and students come to me needing FAR, and if they don't pass FAR this time, then they're going to lose credit for Reg. That's pressure, Ala'a. You don't want that kind of pressure. Yeah, and you know, the student says, I just heard about you from my friend. Can you help me pass FAR? If I don't pass FAR this window, I'm going to lose credit for Reg. You know what I tell them? I say, yeah, you better take 2 weeks off from work. Take 2 weeks off from work, and we'll work together every day, and I'll get you past FAR. And you know, I have to talk them into it. I have to say, you got to take those 2 weeks off because we're going to work together because you don't want to miss and have to go back and take Reg again, right? So sometimes you have to take some time off from work, even when that time isn't coming, even when you don't have the time, even when they don't, even though you took a vacation already a month or two ago. This is more important. Yeah. And if this isn't more important, then you're doing this for the wrong reason.
Absolutely.
This has to be the most important thing.
Yeah. Very, very helpful, really. Thank you for those great tips, really. So can you give us also some audit exam tips?
Audit? Oh, yeah. Audit's funny because audit is nothing like, the audit exam does not test your ability as an auditor at all. You probably noticed that. The audit exam does not test your ability to perform an audit. The audit exam is a word game. It's a puzzle.
Yeah, it is.
That's
why,
right?
It's very tricky, very tricky.
Very tricky. The wording will kill you in audit. In a typical multiple choice question, the audit exam offers answer choices that are close to being correct, and therefore the wrong answer is often right, but it's right for a slightly different question. That's the game that is the audit exam. You're going to see answer choices that look really good. The wrong answers are going to look right, and they are right, but they're right for a slightly different question. They're wrong for this question. Only one answer is right for this question. The other ones are going to be right for a slightly different question. See, FAR's not like that. But audit, all the multiple choice questions tend to be like that. It's a word game. You got to learn the game. You really don't get any advantage by being an experienced auditor. Going into the audit exam by being an experienced auditor, I got to tell you, I don't think that's really an edge. Reg, you get a little bit more of an advantage if you do a lot of tax work. But in audit, no. Because if you don't learn the game, if you don't learn the word game, you're not going to pass audit. I can't emphasize that enough. You got to learn to play the word game and play to win. I got an email from a student just the other day. Let me see if I can find this. From John, who recently passed audit. He said, I'm surprised and amazed that I could pass such a brutal section of the CPA exam just by listening to your audit lectures. Here's the best part, he said. I killed the multiple choice questions. They were as you said they would be. And thanks to you, Darius, I was prepared for the trickery. How about that?
Wow.
I was
Wow,
prepared
that's
for
great.
the trickery. And that's audit.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it. In one sentence, you've got to be prepared for the trickery because more than one answer always appears correct. That's how audit is. It's not like FAR in that case, but I do like taking audit after FAR. Why? Why should you take audit after FAR? Because there's journal entries in audit. Oh yeah, there's journal entries in audit, and it gets candidates angry, not my students because they're ready for it, but it gets candidates mad when they see journal entries on the audit exam when they didn't expect it. Well, if you're going to be an auditor a lot, don't you have to know the journal entries that should have been made? Of course, because how could you be the auditor and tell the company that they made the wrong journal entries if you don't know what the entries are supposed to be?
Yes, exactly.
So of course there's going to be journal entries on the audit exam. There should be journal entries on the audit exam, and there are journal entries on the audit exam. And that's why I suggest to take audit shortly after FAR. There's also ratios on the audit exam, and there's ratios on FAR. So take audit shortly after FAR. I would say start with FAR, then take audit right after that. And then other than that, other than the word game and the idea that you got to know your journal entries and ratios, audit, almost all of my live tutoring sessions for audit are about assertions and transaction cycles. That's where I do all my live tutoring for audit. It seems that everybody who fails audit comes to me, shows me their score. They're weak. They get a 70. They're weak on evidence gathering. They're weak on assertions. They don't know when the answer is existence and when the answer is valuation. And that's so important for assets, for asset assertions. When is the answer existence? When is the answer valuation? Very important to know that. You got to know that whenever they're asking you about assets on the audit exam, they want to know what assertion applies. If the auditor is gathering evidence with regard to the contra asset, the answer is valuation. That's important. If the auditor is gathering evidence regarding the contra asset, like allowance for doubtful accounts or accumulated depreciation, the answer is valuation. But if the auditor is gathering evidence with regard to the asset itself, not the contra asset, but the asset itself, the top line number, then the answer is existence. For example, they'll send out confirmations with receivables. Why? Because they want to know whether that receivable is real or fake. That's an existence concern, not valuation. Now, if those receivables are fake, then the customer doesn't exist. That's got nothing to do with valuation. That's all about existence. And those questions are, they're everywhere. They're pervasive in the audit exam, is those assertion questions and two directional tests. You've got to know that. That's audit.
Yeah, great.
Assertions, ratios, the word game. That's it for audit. I mean, the opinions, you know, you could look over the opinions. Of course, you got to know the new issuer opinion has changed. And there's that critical audit matters section now. So, and audit data analytics, there's some new stuff. But I'll tell you what, when I was looking through the newly released AICPA audit questions that they just released, it seemed like every one of those questions that they released for audit were right out of my I-75 test bank.
Wow.
Well, that must be why I have such a high passing rate for audit, because I got you ready for those questions. There they are. They just released them, and they're essentially right out of my test bank. Incredible. Incredible. That's why I was able to turn it around and quickly put it on YouTube and say, all right, here's the explanations of these audit questions, because I already know the answers. It's almost as if the AICPA would go into a test bank like mine because it would represent the road less traveled for them, because they know that, you know, the masses take Becker, the masses take Wiley, the masses take the other courses, right? So everybody's seen those questions, but the masses don't yet take I-75. So let's see what those questions look like, the AICPA might think, right? So maybe they would go into a smaller, lesser known test bank, because you know why? It takes them a lot of time to make up their own questions. They know they have a shortage of people to make up questions for the AICPA. It's not a full-time job. They don't make a lot of money coming up with CPA exam questions, yet it's important to do. So if they don't want to spend the time doing it, where do they get them from? They get them from test banks. So it didn't surprise me at all to see so many questions that looked like they were right out of my I-75 test bank get released by the AICPA. Didn't surprise me at all.
Great, great. That's really incredible. Great. Yeah. So can you give us some BEC exam tips as well?
BEC. Well, here's the deal with BEC. After passing FAR and then audit, I suggest BEC next because there's ratios still in there. But there's a catch. Candidates either crush BEC or they get crushed by BEC. There's no in between. BEC is either your best exam, you studied for 4 weeks and got an 80, or you took it 4 times and you still don't have a clue what that's how it is with BEC. It's either your best or your worst. There's no in between. In fact, BEC, I predict soon will be broken up because there's so many, it's like a mashup right now, right? BEC, it's got all these different unrelated topics. You got economics in there. IT is in there. Like your cost accounting, your corporate governance. I think what's going to happen very soon is that BEC is going to be broken up into IT and everything else.
Wow.
Which means I think there's going to be a separate IT exam very soon. They're going to take IT out of BEC. They're going to make it its own exam. And then there's going to be everything else. I don't know if that means there's going to be a 5th exam or they're just going to reshuffle the deck and they're just going to move different things around into different exams. But they're thinking about it right now. So the most important part of BEC right now is definitely IT. Without a doubt. IT, especially emerging technologies with regard to IT. Emerging technologies are what? They're relevant. And what did we say about relevant before? If it's relevant, the AICPA wants to test it. If it's new, if it's emerging, it's relevant, and the AICPA loves to be a relevant exam. So something like computer crimes, artificial intelligence, Bitcoin and blockchain, that's the kind of thing you got to be ready to answer questions on because it's all relevant. Remember, the AICPA's biggest fear is they have candidates taking and passing this difficult CPA exam, and they have questions that were relevant 20 years ago, where they ask you about the difference between batch processing and online real-time processing. Well, that was a very important question 10, 15 years ago. Not that big a deal today. They'll still ask a question like that, but that may be more likely to be a wrong answer choice somewhere along the line now. Now they're asking about emerging technologies. Now, most of the other BEC favorites like variance analysis, net present value, competition and strategy, job order costing, that stuff's been around for a long time and they're more predictable, they're easier to prepare for. But the IT stuff and the corporate governance too, those are the 2 biggest parts of BEC that when students don't pass, it's usually those 2 areas. Because corporate governance is like a word game. We're back to the audit word game again when we play the corporate governance section of BEC. Why? Because it's all theory, right? It's all just like audit. In fact, it's all COSO, and that's part of audit too. So it really does seem like it would be a word game. It fits right in to that theme. Now, the other thing that with BEC is writing assignments, right? You got that writing assignment part. And how does a candidate prepare for writing for the BEC exam? Well, I recommend an approach known as compare and contrast. And here's the deal with that. Take 2 BEC topics that are tested together, such as job order versus process costing, and write yourself a memo to your supervisor, which they might ask you to do on the exam, and just compare and contrast job order costing with process costing. And talk about how job order costing is for units that are always different, whereas process costing are for units that are all the same. And just go on about what the advantages are, disadvantages to certain things. And that's how not only will you prepare for the writing, but you'll be more familiar with job order costing and process costing because you've written about it, you see? So now if you get a multiple choice question on it, instead of a writing assignment, you're even more prepared because you've written about it. And when you write it, you begin to what? Remember it. And that's why I don't let anybody download my notes. You've got to take your own notes. Very important part of passing the exam, Ala'a, is you have to take good notes. As you write it, you start to remember it. One thing I don't like about CPA review preparation, when the other houses push these flashcards on you and they say, hey, memorize 500 flashcards. No, because the flashcards, somebody else wrote them. So you might not even understand the meaning of them. And now you're memorizing what somebody else wrote before you even know if you understand it. How's that going to give you confidence on the day of the exam? It isn't. But if you write it and you review what you wrote, that's going to help you. So BEC, it's all about IT, corporate governance, and the writing part. I like to do the compare and contrast.
Yeah,
but like I said, BEC is either your favorite or your worst.
Yeah.
It's either your best or your worst. That's how BEC is.
Great. Very helpful, really, yeah. Finally, can you give us some Reg exam tips and advice?
Well, Reg I like to save for last. And, I like to go FAR first, then Audit, because they're so close with all those journal entries and Audit. Then BEC, and then finally Reg. Most candidates don't really appreciate how much material there is for Reg. Reg is the most underestimated exam. Because if you work in tax, you think, oh, I'm a tax person. Reg's going to be easy for me. Well, you'll get an advantage by being a tax person, but only for your specialty, whatever it is that you specialize in Reg, that'll help you. If it's individual tax, you'll have an edge. But then there's partnerships, there's corporations, there's S corps, there's estates and trusts, there's multi-jurisdictional tax also. There's like-kind exchanges. Can't forget about business structures and business law. So you got to know the flow of a 1040, and I have one of my first videos in the I-75 Reg course is the flow of a 1040. In fact, I have several videos where I open up the 1040. The schedules are already all filled out, and we show where everything goes from, let's say, Schedule B back to the 1040, from Schedule D back to the 1040. We follow the amounts as they're flowing through the 1040, and that's how you get confidence. That's huge if you want to pass Reg. You've got to know what figures flow to what schedules.
Yeah.
I think the other courses, what they do is they use blank 1040s and blank schedules and they just roll them across the screen. I don't understand why they do that. In fact, I have a sim where I narrate a 941 payroll tax return. That's important because most candidates don't understand payroll and the idea that the FICA tax has to be matched by the employer, withheld by the employee, yes, and then matched by the employer. I have a sim that will make you an expert on a 941 payroll tax return. See, all my sims are narrated. All my sims are narrated by me step by step, so that by the time you finish the sim, it's all meant to teach you and give you confidence. And now you'll be an expert in the 941 payroll tax return because you probably never learned it before unless you work in it every day. I have another one where I show every important line on a K1. How important do you think the K1s are on a CPA Reg exam? Because if you're a partner in a partnership, if you're an S Corp shareholder, if you're in estates or trust, you're getting a K1. You've got to know where those line items go from the K1 to your 1040. I got a couple of sims where I narrate and explain that. The other must-know topics for Reg, like-kind exchanges. You got to know like-kind exchanges. And the hardest part is, if there's a mortgage on the property that you're going to get rid of, and there's a mortgage on the property that you're going to take back, where do the mortgages go when I try to do the calculation for realized gain, recognized gain? I go through that. You're going to be an expert at that. Very important. The like-kind exchange, because that will be on your exam. M1 reconciliation. Is there anything more important than that in corporate tax? M1 reconciliation, book income to taxable income, right?
Yeah.
Huge. You know you're going to get that. Distributions from partnerships, distributions from corporations. Got to know that. The difference between adjustments to arrive at AGI versus what's deductible from AGI. And then let's not forget some of the brand new tax law items from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, like the child tax credit and the credit for things like family leave and the QBI deduction. There's a perfect example of what do you have to know for the QBI and what don't you have to know. QBI, qualified business income deduction, is a very misunderstood area of tax law under the new law. Most practitioners don't understand it very well. So what do you think the exam is going to do? You think they're going to give you a really hard problem on it? No, but you're going to have to know something about it. Key to the CPA exam, I can't emphasize this enough, you got to know something about everything without trying to know what? Everything about anything. Remember, you couldn't possibly know everything about everything or you'd be a freak. You don't have to be a freak to pass, but you have to know something about everything, and that's going to take time, Ala'a. That's why you can't pass in 2 to 3 weeks. You can't do it because you won't have confidence on exam day. It's just not reality. You got to get on the right road. You got to feel good about it every day. This is a mental game. This is a mental game. You've got to manage the ups and downs, the roller coaster of emotion that you're going to have every day when you wake up. Some days you're going to feel really good and say, yep, I'm ready. I'm going to put my couple hours in today. Other days you're going to get up and you're going to say, oh, this is never going to end. This is never going to end. I have 1 part passed and I got 3 parts to go, and I'm busy at work, and you got to manage that. How do you do it? Very important. You got to be confident knowing that you're working with somebody who's taking out all the stuff that you don't need and only saying to you, this is what you need to know about this topic. This is what you need to know about the topic. And being confident that as long as you follow the road, you're going to be fine. You start to go orbiting somewhere around a 10,000 multiple choice question test bank, you're going to go nuts. You're going to go nuts because you can't possibly learn 10,000 multiple choice questions when half of them are outliers and have no chance of being on the exam.
Yeah, great. Very, very great tips. And I really thank you for these, great tips that I am sure will help a lot of CPA exam candidates in their study.
Ala'a, I want to thank you and congratulate you again on your success. This is a great program, and you and I will keep in touch. And if I could ever help you more, you know where to get in touch with me.
Of course. So where can candidates contact you if they have any questions?
Okay, the best place to get in touch with me, you can hook up with me on LinkedIn at cpaexamtutoring.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Darius Clark. And also the website, CPAexamtutoring.com. You can email me at Darius@CPAexamtutoring.com. And if you just want to tell me about your CPA exam journey and you want me to just try to determine where you went wrong, where you got off course, I'll be happy to do that for you. So if anybody wants to just, say, hey, here's somebody that I can really think could help me, that's what I do all day long. I'm here for you. You probably even know somebody that either left me a LinkedIn recommendation, or you probably know somebody that I've helped by now. And if that's the case, let me know who it is, because, it's really not that big of a CPA exam subculture. It's really not that large. Just about everybody knows somebody who I've probably worked with at this point.
Yeah. So I would like to inform the audience that you have offered them a free gift. So can you tell us a bit about your gift?
Yeah, so if you want to take a free week on I-75, you can hit me up at the course. Tell me a little something about yourself, about your journey. And if you're a first-time student, if it's something that you want to try, the course is out for 7 days, let me know and we'll get you started. So go to CPAexamtutoring.com and click the Ask Darius button, or just email me at Darius@CPAexamtutoring.com. And if you're a first-time student, tell me about your journey and let's get to know each other. I want to know a little bit more about your situation, and I'll get you right onto the road. There's a reason why I call it I-75, Ala'a, because that's exactly what you need to pass. You don't need an 85.
Yeah.
You don't need a 90, but you got to get a 75. You don't want a 71.
Yeah. Great. I really love what you are doing, and you are really helping CPA candidates a lot. And
yes, I am, and I feel good about it. And thanks to you for noticing.
Thank you. I really encourage people to contact you and learn from you, because you really help people a lot and save their time. So
Time
that's
is everything
incredible.
in this subculture. Time is everything. I wish there was somebody around like me back then when I was taking the exam.
Yeah, that's excellent. Great. So would you like to say anything before we end the interview?
Every time I start a tutoring session with a student or I set out to record a new video, I remind myself of three things. One,
Yeah.
you're a CPA candidate, but you're not an expert. Two, you probably forgot more than you ever knew about this topic that we're about to learn. And three, you're not even particularly interested in the subject matter other than to pass the exam. And that's so important. I have that posted on my wall in my office. So before I start any tutoring session, I look at that. That's where the difference is between someone like me who teaches CPA review and nothing else, and a CPE course lecturer who can talk at a high level and might really love the topic and know a lot about it, but they don't realize that the candidate might not love it so much, and they're just trying to pass the exam.
Yeah.
That's probably why I have as many recommendations for teaching CPA review as I do.
Great, great. Well, thank you, Darius, for being with us today. You gave great tips and tricks and advice for CPA exam candidates to pass this beast of exam. So thank you so much for your time with us.
Thank you, Ala'a. Keep up the good work.